Pete, it's an unusual time for an interpro match in the middle of the Six Nations. It's also got a lot riding on it. This is a must-win for Connacht if you're going to catch Munster.
It is a must-win, and we've approached that over, I suppose these last couple of weeks. Really, it's death or glory for us. We need to we need to make a statement in terms of keeping those wins coming. And as pleasing as it is to be guaranteed for Champions Cup rugby next year, we want to top this conference, and we've left ourselves a little bit of work to do at this back end of the season, but we've still got real confidence that we can get ourselves there, and that it is in our control. But as you've alluded to there, it will take a big performance and making sure we get the result away at Munster this week as well.
It's a strong team. There's obviously, at this stage of the season, there's going to be a few players missing through injury. The two that stand out probably for me are long-term Tom Farrell, Quinn Roux would be probably in the starting 15. But generally, you're well covered starting, and you've got good cover on the bench as well.
Yeah, we do. As you said, Tom and Quinn will always be a loss, and particularly whether it's interpros or any other time of the year. And it's a shame not to have them, but equally at lock and centre, they're two positions where we do have some really good depth. And to be able to trot out Bundy and Tom Daly at centre is fantastic for us. And then obviously have two senior locks still available in Alton and Gav. It's a shame not to have the other guys, but it's not a cause for concern. So yeah, we feel pretty confident that the strength and depth we've got there in the 15, and then those guys to come off the bench as well.
Two names stood out to me in the pack. One was Conor Oliver coming back in as a starter at 7, and John Porch on the wing. And Alex Wooten, who's been scoring tries for fun, is on the bench. Can you give me any ideas behind the thinking behind that?
Yeah, no problems. I mean, in terms of Conor Oliver, we felt, I suppose, numerous reasons really to include him. I think he brings a relentlessness and an abrasiveness and a terrific engine to our back row and to that balance of the back row. And this is exactly the sort of fixture where you want those qualities in the pack. Add in the personal element for him in terms of, being a former Munster player himself, that brings with it an excitement and a whole nother level of energy. And as long as that's focused in the right direction and controlled, I think that can add enormous value to an individual's performance and his contribution to the team. So, it's good timing for Conor. We would have liked to use him, in the last couple of weeks, but again, the balance and the performance of those other back row players has meant he's not had the opportunity, but this one's been on the horizon for him, and I think it's really good timing. So he's trained brilliantly this week. He's got the bit between his teeth, and I think it's a great game for him to start, and we're looking forward to seeing how he goes. In terms of that back three, yeah, absolutely right. Alex Wooten, he's been scoring tries for fun, and again, as a former Munster player, he'll be naturally disappointed not to be starting, but I'm sure he'll have a prominent role to play off the bench as well. We've got that balance, obviously, as you said. John Porch has played a fair bit at 15 this season, and partly that's been to Tiernan's absence through a couple of injuries, and partly that's just been because Porchy's done a really good job in that jersey. So it came down to looking a little bit at the balance of that back three. You've got Matt Healy's left foot, which is important to us. When Jack Carty's at 10 as opposed to Conor Fitzgerald, it gives us a nice balance with a right foot and a left foot kicker there in a game where there will be an element of kicking, and that part of the game will be important in terms of the flow of momentum. Tiernan's natural position is fullback, and we think he's best at 15. So it really only leaves that one wing spot. And, Porchy's been terrific for us under the high ball, but also around, I suppose, his aggressiveness with the contact and some of that backfield management. So there's enormous pluses in the column for John, and there's also enormous pluses for Woots. And, unfortunately this time Alex is the one to miss out. But as I said, he'll have a role to play off the bench, and he'll be determined to make an impact as well.
It's an interesting looking Munster side. I suppose they're 9 and 10. Craig Casey is flavour of the month at the moment, and he's been talked about a lot as a potential Ireland scrum half for a long-term basis. Ben Healy's at 10. Is closing them down and putting them under, making sure they get difficult ball, an absolute key to this one for you?
I think it is a key factor. I think you're right to highlight that. In terms of their game management, that's something that's really important to all teams, but especially Munster in terms of how they navigate their way through the field zones, but also how they coordinate their attack from set piece, which as we know is again a really important weapon for them. So those two will be key to that. And as you said, there's a bit of youth there. They're both very good players, but certainly in an interpro where there's an enormous amount to play for both sides, there'll be pressure on them as you would expect, and they would expect nonetheless either. So, we'll look to apply some of that pressure and see what sort of reward we can get there. But it's not just about putting them off their game. It's about the impact that it potentially then has, in terms of how the whole team wants to function. But there's some pretty good players around them as well. So, in terms of what they've got there in the back row and the inside backs either side of them. So, it's not just as simple as going after one or two guys and hoping the whole, the house of cards comes down. There'll be good support for them. And as I said, they're very good players in their own right. But no, we'll certainly go after them and look to apply pressure wherever we can.
Connacht's record away to Munster doesn't make great reading. It's a difficult place to go. The last team to beat Munster, other than Leinster in Thomond Park, was the Scarlets. That was 4 years ago. And Connacht have only got one win in 20 in Munster and one draw. And I know that's all in the past and you don't have control of that, but I've watched a lot of those games down there live. Sadly, won't be doing it tomorrow. Access to the actual game is very difficult against Munster. Maybe more so than any team. It's almost like the game is happening around and in front of you. And you can work really hard. And I've seen Connacht go down there and work really hard and get very, very little return. How do you actually get into a pattern so that you can actually influence the game rather than just take part in it?
It's a really interesting question. And I think what Munster generally have done well in these games against Connacht and particularly down there is that, they've probably struck first blow and, they'll come at you with an enormous physicality and organisation behind that physicality. And when they get that score or get those few points ahead, they're very good at then maintaining that pressure and maintaining that momentum. So for us, it becomes how you break that momentum cycle once you get into that position. So I suppose there's a few things for us. Firstly is to make sure that they don't get easy access to the game initially, and whether that's access to your 22, whether that's cheap penalties, either to get shots at goal or kicks for line-outs and mauls within your 22, or whether that's actually points. It's making sure we don't give up anything lightly too easily. Now, obviously, that's always a focus in any game, but with that flow of momentum, it's particularly important, I think, against Munster. The other element, or another element, is what kind of access we give them in terms of their platform. So if you're recognising that, they're particularly dangerous off certain parts of the game, whether that's the maul, whether that's structured plays from line-outs, how we control our use of the ball in terms of our counter-attack, our kicking game, when we kick, what types of kick we use, whether we're going long to touch, long down the middle of the field, contestable. There's a whole variety of options there that we can control when we're in possession of the ball. And the knock-on effect then is that you deprive them of the platforms that they're looking for to generate their momentum. So I think that's key as well. And the last bit we've actually talked about a lot this week, and it's probably no great surprise to people, but we've still got to fire shots ourselves. It's not just about going down there and looking to contain them. And admittedly, even with my defence hat on, we've got to fire some shots and we've got to cause them trouble and back our game to be good enough to stress them. And I think if there's, of the many learnings we've taken in recent weeks, I think the strength of our form away from home and against some pretty resilient opposition at times, we've proved that our game can cause other teams problems and can reverse that flow of momentum and as I said, actually cause some damage at the other end. So it's being wary about their threats and how we give them opportunity or access to using those threats, but at the same time not being afraid to back ourselves and fire a few shots and know that it doesn't have to be perfect. These types of games away at Munster, you can go down there and maybe you concede an early penalty or maybe two, and all of a sudden you can feel like it's not your day. But I think where this Connacht team has evolved is being able to go into these sort of games. Maybe you do hit a speed bump, but the belief remains. And, you gather your thoughts and you go again. And actually, it's not decided in the first 5 minutes or the first couple of plays. There's a longer game to be played there. And as Benetton last week proved, if you win it with the last play of the game, you're still winning the game. And it's about hanging in there and backing yourself to get there in the end.
Yeah, the game in Galway early in the new year there, Connacht were out of that game for so long, but you weren't that far behind, and then you got an opportunity and you got it back to a winnable opportunity, and Connacht didn't make the right decisions, and you've acknowledged that. And playing against 13 men, there was maybe not a clear thought. Are you in a better position now, do you think, to exploit that sort of situation? Have these wins and the consistency of selection helped you?
I do think we're in a better spot to exploit those opportunities. I think, we suffered in those 2 or 3 games with, how we executed at the tail end of games. But I think what we've shown there in terms of our performance against Cardiff, and then certainly how we saw the game out there against Benetton, is that we have learned from that. And as you said, whether it's down to consistency of selection or just clarity of options in those moments, or actually just belief that we can do it as opposed to hoping to do it, we genuinely believe we can do it. I think we have showed that we've evolved in that space. And I would like to think, you don't get the luxury, but if we had our time again in some of those games, whether it be Ulster or Munster or Ospreys, those moments that we have had to learn from, I'd like to think we'd handle them, differently and better now with the growth that we've had since then. And that's not just blind optimism. I think we've shown that, as I said, with the Cardiff and the Benetton performances, that we're moving in the right direction.